17 police visits in 6 months. That's how many times law enforcement showed up at my gate. Not because I broke any laws, but because I came home. I returned to my family's ranch after 4 decades on the bench, thinking I'd finally enjoy the kind of peace I'd spent my whole life defending for others. But the moment I stepped foot back onto that land, the HOA president, Beverly Thorne, made it her personal mission to drive me off it first. It seemed petty. A trash can place 3 degrees off angle. My mailbox painted the wrong shade of black. A 1972 Ford pickup hidden behind a fence called a visual disruption. I laughed, shrugged it off, filed the notices into what I jokingly called my comedy folder. But it didn't stop. The violations kept coming, more absurd by the week. And then the sheriff started showing up. But here's what chilled me to the bone. It wasn't about rules anymore. Beverly's fixation wasn't normal. This wasn't about property standards. It was about control, and she needed me gone. What I uncovered next? Well, that changed everything. The day I moved in, I found an old oak survey marker at the far edge of the property, where my land met the suburban sprawl of Crimson Point Estates. Carved into the weathered wood was a strange symbol, a triangle within a circle with crossed wheat stalks underneath. My grandfather's handiwork, I assumed. The man was meticulous about boundaries. Then the HOA notices started. Weekly, then daily. Beverly pulled up in her beige golf cart one afternoon like some deranged field marshal in pearls, informing me that my barn didn't match the architectural character of the neighborhood. This neighborhood, mind you, that technically didn't include me. I checked the county records just to be sure. And sure enough, every deed, every survey, confirmed that my land was not under HOA jurisdiction. That old oak marker? It wasn't just a fence post. It was a line, legal and literal, and Beverly had no business stepping over it. But she kept stepping. Things escalated. Security cameras were installed, not on my land, but angled directly at it. Residents were sent warning emails calling me a threat to the community. People who used to wave crossed the street when jogging by. Kids stopped looking at my horses. And still the sheriff came. Each time, embarrassed and apologetic, but obligated to respond. Then I got a letter from Apex Mineral Group, a Denver-based company claiming rights to conduct mineral surveys on my land, through a lease signed with something called the Thorne Family Trust. The timing was too convenient. Beverly's campaign, the harassment, the smear emails, it had all been groundwork. Apex wasn't some distant corporation. This was a con, and Beverly was knee-deep in it. But she made one mistake. She underestimated how deeply my family had buried its roots. That old photograph I found in the barn showed my grandfather standing beside that oak marker, alongside 3 other men, all holding a legal document. On the back, in my grandfather's handwriting, the covenant makers. August 15th, 1947. Let this stand as proof against all claims. That word, covenant, unlocked something that I spent 3 days digging through the county archives. Dozens of coffee cups, hundreds of dusty folders. One sore back later, I found it. The Master Covenant for the Preservation of Agricultural Heritage. 4 ranch families, back in 1947, had created a legal firewall, a covenant that barred any industrial or mineral extraction on their lands, in perpetuity. Not just filed with the county, but with the state. And here's the kicker. Any transfer of rights without written consent from all parties would trigger an automatic reversion clause that Beverly's lease. Invalid from the moment ink touched paper that I showed it to a local historian, Dr. Patricia Hawkins. Her eyes lit up like she was handling a holy relic. Your grandfather didn't just protect his land, she whispered. He protected an entire way of life. Now I had my weapon. Not revenge, not rage, but law. Old, dusty, airtight law. I drafted the lawsuit myself. 40 years on the bench will give you that kind of confidence. Beverly was served at the Crimson Point Summer Gala, right as a string quartet played Vivaldi. I told the process server to be loud. He didn't disappoint that I in court. She tried to play the community protector, spinning some noble nonsense about standards. But I had the records, the emails, the camera footage. I had the mineral rights lease, signed with her name and not one shred of legal standing. I had Deputy Russo, whose own grandfather had signed the covenant, on the stand confirming that Beverly had called the sheriff's department 17 times over phantom infractions. Then, under pressure, she snapped. "You think that old piece of paper matters?" she screamed in open court. "There's $50 million of minerals under that ranch. I earned it." Her words, not mine. Confession, captured in front of a packed courtroom. The judge's ruling? Swift and merciless. HOA, dissolved. All fines, voided. Apex, permanently barred from touching my land. Beverly, personally liable for $200,000 in punitive damages. The courtroom erupted. Some folks cried. Some cheered. Beverly just sat there, pale, stunned, ruined. Her empire, gone in a gavel's echo point. 3 weeks later, her mansion was boxed up and emptied out. No one waved. No one helped. She vanished from Crimson Point without a single neighbor to see her off. But that wasn't the end. The next community meeting. The first without the HOA's shadow hanging over it. Neighbors gathered to plan a shared garden, right where Beverly had once tried to build a wall. They laughed. Kids played. People acted like neighbors again. I stood up and donated every cent of the damages to the new Crimson Point Community Fund to fix up common areas, help folks in need, and, most importantly, to remind everyone, this place belongs to all of us. Now the tomatoes grow freely. No citations, no fear, and the only eyes watching over this land are the birds overhead and the spirit of the men who built it right the first time. But tell me this, how many other communities out there are being held hostage by people like Beverly Thorne? How many covenants, literal or moral, have we let decay in the back of some dusty drawer while greed walks freely in broad daylight? I want to hear from you. Have you ever fought back against a system designed to crush you? Have you ever seen a neighbor become a tyrant? Because sometimes the smallest boundary marker can draw the line between freedom and control, and sometimes an old man and a tomato garden can start a revolution. I thought that would be the end of it. Case closed, land secured, tomatoes thriving. But as any old judge will tell you, real victory's never that clean. A month after Beverly Thorne disappeared from Crimson Point, I got a knock at my door. It was Deputy Russo, not in uniform this time, just jeans, a flannel shirt, and a look on his face that said he wasn't dropping by for coffee. "You might want to see this," he said, handing me a manila envelope. No return address, but the seal? Department of the Interior. Inside was a formal notification. "Your property has been flagged for federal review under the Strategic Resources Preservation Act, citing national interest in critical minerals." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. This wasn't over. Beverly may have been the puppet, but someone else had been pulling strings behind her. And now, they were stepping out of the shadows. I contacted Marcus, my old friend and property lawyer, and forwarded him the documents. Within a day, he called me back, voice low and serious. "Elliot," he said, "this isn't just about copper or rare earths anymore. The SRPA is rarely used, and when it is, it's usually backed by someone high up. Military contracts, federal extraction rights. We're talking national security loopholes." Just like that, my fight went from HOA horror story to something much bigger. You'd think a 72-year-old retired judge wouldn't stand a chance against Washington, D.C., but they forgot one thing. I've seen how these games are played, and I still had the master covenant. Better yet, I had a community now, not just neighbors, witnesses. Turns out, Crimson Point had been built with federal grant money under a Post 9/11 urban development bill. I dug deeper. Beverly's husband, the one she screamed about in court, retired colonel. His last posting? Procurement officer for a Department of Defense contractor linked to Apex. Oh, now the story was starting to twist again. HOA rules were just the surface. The real plan? Use federal influence to quietly access mineral-rich land under the guise of local development. The HOA fines, the harassment, the surveillance. All tactics to force private owners like me to sell or break. And once we were gone, Apex could move in without public outcry. But here's the thing about shadows. Shine a bright enough light, and they scatter. Ethan Hayes, remember him, the young father from 3 houses down? He'd been recording every HOA meeting since our trial. One of his old recordings captured Beverly bragging to a visiting consultant about federal backing and how Apex had friends in Washington. The guy? Former Department of Energy official. We traced him. With Marcus leading the charge, we filed a cease and desist against the department's action, citing the Master Covenant as a protected legal instrument, not just civilly binding, but publicly recorded at both county and state level before any federal contract existed. We also launched a public records request that uncovered a treasure trove of emails linking Beverly, Apex, and federal consultants, all colluding to pressure ranch owners into selling it. That's when things got wild. Reporters caught wind. A retired judge facing off against federal interests? That sells. Within a week, local stations ran pieces titled Tomatoes versus Washington and the judge who said no. Then the national media picked it up. CNN called. So did NPR. One outlet even dubbed me the last rancher standing. The pressure worked. Facing mounting bad press and congressional questions, the Department of the Interior quietly withdrew the SRPA review. Apex's Denver office went dark within days. Whatever backup plan they had, it crumbled under the weight of scrutiny. But I wasn't done yet. See, I'd spent decades watching the system bury stories like mine, file them away under bureaucracy and red tape until people just gave up. I wasn't about to let that happen here. I partnered with Dr. Hawkins and the surviving families of the other covenant signers to digitize every page of that 1947 Master Covenant. We built an online archive, made it public, searchable, a blueprint for communities nationwide. Turns out, Crimson Point wasn't alone. We got emails from Texas, Arizona, Nevada, places where HOAs had been used to disguise land grabs, where retirees and working families were being priced out or fined into foreclosure. Our little fight sparked something larger, a grassroots legal movement. We called it Covenant Keepers. A few months later, I found myself testifying before a congressional subcommittee, explaining how one HOA president and a few quiet connections nearly stole $50 million worth of minerals under the cover of community standards. I wasn't just defending my land anymore. I was defending the right to peace, to privacy, to not be bullied off your own soil by someone with a clipboard and too much ambition. Now, life at the ranch has found its rhythm again. Ethan's kids run wild in that community garden where Beverly's wall was supposed to go. Folks stop by not to complain, but to chat about compost or canning jars or how best to keep deer off pole beans. No cameras, no citations, no fear. The tomatoes? They're still magnificent. And the old oak marker? We built a bench around it. Carved into the wood is a phrase that Dr. Hawkins suggested. This land is not for sale, not to greed, not to fear, not to silence. But let me leave you with this, because the fight may be over for me. But maybe it's just starting where you live. Who really controls your neighborhood? Are your community standards protecting your peace or paving the way for someone else's profit? Have you ever watched someone try to turn a neighborhood into a kingdom? If so, tell me, because I've got some tomato seedlings and a playbook you're going to want to see.